will be called to order at what, 1:32? 1:33. And is Carissa here to call the roll?
Mr. Crump. Here. Mr. Feaser. Here. Mr. Gamble. Ms. Gowd. Here. Mr. LaMontagne. Here. Mr. Over. Here. Ms. Schreiber. Here. Ms. Van Dam. Here. Ms. Connors. Here. Ms. Gertman. Here. Mr. Johnson. Dr. Lowry.
Here.
Ms. Post. Here. Mr. Robbins. Here. Ms. Wheeler. Here. Mr. Brower.
Here. Thank you. Thank you for everybody for being here. It's been a long process to get here. It's good to see you. We didn't have as much public participation as I had hoped for, but all of you on the Citizens Advisory Committees have sure worked hard and put in time. So thank you, and I'm going to turn this over to, who's going to take it away? George, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Mr. Chair, Honorable Council, and thank you for the committee and all their hard work and Ms. Connor's leadership. I'm going to, Brad Burbaugh has really taken the lead as we, of course, put together a whole new division to oversee both Forever and Echo, and along with his other duties in our ag department. So Brad's really taken on this project, and I'm going to turn it over to him as to put together the presentation here.
Thank you, Mr. County Manager. If it is okay, Mr. Chair, I'd like to defer to our chair to offer some opening remarks as well. Marion, go ahead.
That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Just very brief comments. This is a group that listened and talked and then talked some more. A lot. This proposal is really our first cut at this. I doubt it will be the last. In fact, we were reminded by some of the folks who attended that it shouldn't be the last. We should be prepared to evolve and let the process take a natural course and make sure we've covered things that we meant to. The Forever Reboot has some new elements. It's, in addition to its original priorities, there are, which have criteria that certainly remain valid. We have some new elements to consider in terms of how we go forward from here. I don't think this reflects everything, thank you. I don't think this proposal reflects everything any one of us wanted to see. So that's good. This is a diverse group. We brought many different perspectives, and as I said, we talked a lot. So a diversity of interests is reflected here. In the listening sessions, the most consistent comments that we heard were about science-based criteria, finishing the conservation corridor, securing partners, federal, state, local, cooperating with ECHO. We had, I think, an excellent workshop with that committee. Not having politics, staying out of selections and negotiations, and mindful of public purpose. We will be looking to the council today for policy direction and intent, and we'll see what comes in next. Partnership opportunities are going to be critical going forward, so one of our purposes consistently was to try and make sure our criteria was consistent with the partners we were hoping to bring to the table with us. So we hope that has come out, and as I say, that's a number of different folks. And it's also a two-way street, because just as we will be going to partners looking for money, we expect there will be folks coming to us. We are looking always for commitments that are long-term. We struggled mightily with the new category of forests and farmlands. It is new to this process. There were no whereas statements to guide us, and so we came at it a number of different directions, and staff brought us a program to help guide that selection. Again, a partnership that we could look forward to. I want to thank staff for their work, their knowledge, their commitment, and their patience. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. So, they're a tremendous resource in this initiative, always. And I want to thank the committee members who also offered their time, knowledge, commitment, and patience. Even though Mr. Gamble is not here and he is on vacation, he is listening online. So even though we don't see a lot of public involvement here, I think we can always have confidence that there is an audience listening to us. And if anyone didn't see it today, I just brought this for reference. This is from today's News Journal. And I took it as a sign that we were meant to be here today, and it's just about disappearing Florida wildlands and the effect on wildlife. So this is something that speaks to the public, and I hope we can support your efforts going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Connor. So I'm going to lead us through a presentation. Everyone has a copy of the PowerPoint. It's also on the screen in front of us. And so briefly give you a overview of where we are in implementing the new program, followed by a snapshot of the progress we've made with the two voter-approved referenda, as well as a high-level overview of what the selection and review process looks like, what the role of each of us sitting at this table is, and then we'll discuss the revised site criteria and proposed new recommended forest and farmlands criteria as well. As we move through these revisions and new criteria that the committee are proposing, I'm going to summarize the best I can the Cliff's Notes version of the committee's thoughts and how we arrived at that revision and proposed recommendation. But I would encourage them, if you would allow, Mr. Chair, to be part of the active participants in the discussion with me today.
Absolutely. Can you interrupt you just for 1 second? So Donna Butler, right behind him, there's a noticeable absence in the room. Would it be appropriate, without giving any detail, just an update on what you told me? She would have been here. Pat Morley's not here, and her husband is in the hospital, and so keep him in your thoughts and prayers. That's it. Go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So just a process update, the committee, and I want to publicly thank them for all of their hard work since they've been appointed in March. So they've had 4 meetings, 2 workshops, including this one, and 5 listening sessions. And so they've really helped facilitate, get us to where we're at today with the joint workshop, which will be followed by our presentation of the process resolutions and recommendations to the council in September, which will allow us to open our call for nominations for land and acquisitions October 1st. So I want to publicly thank them, but also give you an update as to where we are. We're so close to that green program implementation. So just a snapshot of where we are. I wanted to give you them. These are just the voter-approved referenda. So in 1986, our voters approved the Endangered Lands Program. So as you can see, the Endangered Lands Program are highlighted in green in the map. Those were properties that were acquired through that program. And so that was about 18,000 acres, of which we manage about 9,000 from that 86 program. It ran from 86 to 95. 2000, the voters approved Volusia Forever, and so we introduced a new tool to our toolbox in that referendum, and that was conservation easements, which allowed us to increase our conservation coverage by purchasing conservation easements from individuals who are good stewards of the land and plan to conserve that land in perpetuity. So as you can see there, we had about 22,000 acres we purchased fee simple and 16,000 in easements that we acquired with partners. I should say that they were very important in helping these programs be successful. So as you can see, the land that we've acquired through these two programs is about 40,000 acres, a little, almost 41,000. The easements are the same for forever, and then we manage, of these two programs, about 21,000 acres. I would be remiss and probably be thumped in the back of my head if I did not share from our land management team that we manage about 37,000 acres. So as you can see in the slide here, we purchased 40,000, but we manage about 21,000. So the key with these programs is being flexible with our partners. If they're purchasing, if they're the lead agency purchasing something next to a parcel that they own, they may manage it. If it's next to a parcel that we own, we may take on management of it. So there is some difference in what we manage versus what was bought with the referenda. So just a high-level snapshot of what the program process will look like for each cycle. We typically have 2 cycles per year where we open a call for nominations, which is led by our staff, and we solicit willing sellers. This is a willing seller program, not an eminent domain program. People who are willing to sell their properties fill out a willing seller program and nominate their property to be considered. After these individuals submit the application, which is a maximum of 10 pages, that just provides an overview of the property, what kind of myriad of ecosystems are on the property, and staff will help them if they need help with the application process. We bring that to the committee, who then, I would much say rather than ranking, using the words sorting, so they sort into A-list properties, which are highest priority for acquisition, and our B-list priorities, which are a lower priority. So once the committee does that, we'll drill down on each of these, but just a high-level overview. We'll bring back the A and B list to the council for their approval. When that happens and it's approved, the A list becomes the active acquisition list, and our staff, our team internally, will start negotiating with landowners that are on that list. We bring back contracts for purchase to the council, and then the conservation process starts where we manage the land in perpetuity. So drilling down just a little bit on each of these, the way that it's a property nomination, so that we may have some partners that bring nominations to the table. We may have committee members who want to nominate a parcel of land. So it's a nomination process, and willing sellers submit an application for consideration as the first step in the process. Those applications are brought into the staff team. Again, the application process is fairly simple and straightforward, and we review those at the staff level and prepare the documents for review at the committee level. So we'll go to step 3, which is advisory committee review. So what the advisory committee will, one, look at them and say, are these properties eligible for consideration? And if they are eligible for consideration, then they will sort them into A-list, B-list properties. So they'll discuss, sort, and prepare a recommended A-B list, which will then be brought to the council. So what is the difference between the A list and the B list? The A list are the highest priority properties. And what does that mean? They meet a certain amount of our criteria. They significantly further the goals of our Volusia Forever program. And most of the time, and we've been super successful in both of our ballot referenda, about 65% of our acquisitions have been funded by us, 35% by partners in both cases. And so it's important to us and important to the committee that there is a potential match fund. And that's what it would mean to be on the A list. And also, it may be a Florida Forever project. So one of the things about the process, and that just builds on what Chair Connors talked about, is that, that the committee's job is to look at these properties and sort them from A to B. And so as council members, you may move a property from the B list to the A list. But if there's a property to be considered, it needs to go through the committee first. So at the county council meeting, you of course will review the advisory committee recommendations, and as I said, the A list will become the active acquisition list. Once it approved, that gives our staff authorization to start engaging with landowners. So some bigger, higher level recommendations that the committee has are related to management. In the past, we've had about 10%, we've had up to 10% set aside for management of the land. And so we've worked with budget and looked at the projections and our needs into the future, and based on that and the discussion with the committee, they're recommending to increase the set aside for management to 15%. This will help us as we acquire new properties, but it will help us transition to a more self-funded model for this program, for the Volusia Forever program. They've also recommended moving towards that self-funded model to fund the acquisition staff and operations from the ad valorem assessment. So those are recommendations that they're making to you today. Before we go into the criteria, I would, for any of the committee to provide comments on any of the discussion or process or recommendations that I've communicated to the council.
I should have mentioned this. I did want to say, for all of the discussion we had, I don't think we landed too far from where we began. And I think that says a lot about how successful this program has been, that even after a lot of discussion and a very, I think, open process in terms of looking at new things, it says a lot about a successful history, that we sought to expand and not change a lot. So, thanks.
All right, well then we'll go into the primary criteria. So this is what we will use to determine if a property is eligible for consideration for a fee simple, so acquiring the land outright, or eligible for consideration of a conservation easement. So we grouped these into the themes that were used previously. And I should say that, and as the chair said at the beginning, you know, these criteria are based on local needs and local ballot language, but they're also overlaid on top of some of the Florida Forever requirements. And so we thought that was important as we move forward to look at what our partners are looking for and see where we can find some commonality as to what our local needs are and what their state level needs are to access some of that funding. And so we're going to go through each of these, so I won't read them to you. One of the things I did want to bring up, you can notice that the enhancement criteria is stricken, and the reason for that, in the previous program, the enhancement criteria really, for lack of a better term, were extra credit, and they weren't counted as part of the primary criteria. And so the committee felt that if these are important, they should be included in the primary criteria. So we have moved some of them from the enhancement criteria up into these categories of the primary criteria for consideration. So we'll start with proximity and connectivity first. So you have two options here. There's a handout and there's the PowerPoint. The PowerPoint is just, it has the changes, where the handout has the criterion that each of the committee members felt should stay. So the first change related to proximity and connectivity is the property within one of these new priority areas. You may know that the state has approved $50 million for acquisition of lands in a new wildlife corridor. This gives us access to a northwestern part of our county that's not included in other priority areas and state programs. And so that's why we've included it here. And also the county's environmental core overlay, which is a county-developed map and approved by council as part of a smart growth initiative that identified areas to protect and enhance environmentally sensitive corridors for wildlife. So that was the thought process for including this one, this new criterion in the process. Water resource development, and so really, a lot of these, there's not substantive changes, but as our chair said, that we're trying to move to operationalize some of these criteria in science and have a uniform data set to compare against properties. So what we're saying is that it still must serve an important groundwater recharge, but there's a map from the St. John's Water Management District will tell us if that is a area of medium or high groundwater recharge, and we'll use that in our evaluation of the property. The second one is this was essentially cleaning up the language, and that the committee moved wetlands to environmentally sensitive lands. We felt water body and waterway were they were basically the same terms, so just tighten the language up. Wetlands will be addressed later, so don't worry about that. So is it on a water body or is it within the 100-year floodplain? So one of the things that the committee felt that there was some discussion about the 100-year floodplain and why to keep it in here is that this will help with the FEMA community rating system that we have, if we have a program that has a component of acquiring floodplain. So what 8 does is more accurately describe what the function of a unique geological feature is. So does it enhance the environmental resources? And are these are the things that we felt would be appropriate for acquisition if a unique geological feature did these. And then lastly, the water development, potable water development was discussed at 2 meetings with the committee, and what they did here is kind of operationalize how they would score water quantity considerations. Environmentally sensitive lands, so number 11, again, this is just allowing us to use a uniform data in our evaluation and a comparison of properties. Number 12, this just broadens the language to estuarine habitats or areas that are vulnerable to sea level rise by 2040. And this is identified by the county's adopted sea level rise projections. And then, so that was just a change in the wording there. And then 13 is a new one. As I said, we moved wetlands to environmentally sensitive lands out of water resource development. So does the property contain high functioning and potentially high functioning? The state has some data that we're able to use to make that determination, and the committee felt that it was important to include. Resource-based recreation lands, so giving the public access is an important part of this. And the committee felt that they needed to add this criteria because it was an important consideration when thinking about whether the property should be on the A list or the B list. Does it have public access, or are we going to have to go across private property? And this is 16 is one that was moved from enhancement criteria. So again, that extra credit criteria. Does the property contain an archaeological site or historical resources? Both of those terms are defined in our Volusia County Code. So we have a point of reference for making this determination. And management, simply adding words. If others will manage the property is an important consideration, if they will manage it in perpetuity. And so in our previous criteria, we didn't have anywhere for an individual to score a point for saying that they would manage the property. So that's why the addition of the words here. Lastly, in management in terms of, this is just tightening up the language in terms of exotic species. 5% is the management threshold based on science-based weed management. So if we know that there's 5% more by ocular view, it's going to cost us more money to get that invasive plant problem under control. Farms and forests, or forests and farmland site ranking criteria. So one of the things that we've tried to do here is, we're going to go to paper now, so you have a handout because they're all new. And the committee discussed if our current primary criteria would be sufficient to meet this new ballot language. And they felt that it would be better suited to have its own criteria. So what we tried to do is align and have some discussions about how do we align this with our local needs, which are the themes here, but also align it with another program that may be a funding partner. And what we did is we found a USDA agricultural conservation easement program where we can apply as the entity, as the government, the local government, to get up to 50% match for some of these conservation easements. And so the criteria you see in front of you are a combination of USDA criteria as well as ours as well. So we'll go through, Sarah, if you'll pull those up for us. So again, as I mentioned at the beginning, that in the 2000 program, the conservation easements were another tool in our toolbox. I think these ag conservation easements are another tool in our toolbox as we move forward for the next 20 years. There's 100,000 acres of farmland in the county. There may be some that is near or next to our conservation lands, but would not have been considered in previous programs because they are working landscapes. And so that's what this program, that's why, if it's a standalone program, why? Because it's another tool in our toolbox, but it's active working farms. So the first three criteria, again, is just, are they close to other land that's protected? And that gives us points in the USDA system. And will it maintain, we may have two parcels that the county owns, and we have someone in between that's a working farm that may be willing to do an agricultural conservation easement. And so if that's the case, and then it will provide connectivity between those habitats, they will get a point in this criteria. Next, furtherance of acquisition efforts. These are our criteria, so these are cut and pasted directly from our primary criteria. Will it help us further our conservation coverage in the county? Environmentally sensitive lands, so 6, and this is a combination. So will the easement area protect native habitat? So is there some forested areas, hence the forest and the name? Is there some scrub areas that would benefit from long-term protection on this parcel? And then are there known populations of threatened or endangered species as well? So that comes from our primary criteria as well. And then when we think about the USDA program and these criterions and preservation of farmland, is it good farmland that we're going to preserve and conserve? And that's where these three criteria come in. And these are points-based criteria in the USDA system. So we may have some that score high and we may be able to get match on, and others that may not. But I think we keep the door open and be flexible with the criteria. And then management, of course, is, we want to ensure if we're doing an ag conservation easement in perpetuity, is there a succession plan on the property, and is it currently enrolled in best management practices? Okay, so we can go back. And so this kind of gives you a understanding or a snapshot of the tentative timeline for the cycle 1. As again, I shared with you that we have 2 cycles, and so our goal is to bring resolutions back to you in September. It would allow us to open the nominations in October and close in November. The staff would start to do the reporting and evaluation for the committee, and then February, March, and April, you can see kind of how the process would enroll for, or the process would play out in the new year. So with that, I'll open any questions. I almost took the meeting over. I'll open it for questions, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to make a comment. wow. You didn't know what you got into. But I just can't tell you from the bottom of my heart how much I appreciate that each and every one of you volunteered to be on this and the work that you've already put into this. I mean, this is just incredible. I just thank you so very, very much for making this a priority. This was a big job, and I can see it's just begun. But thank you so much.
I had a question about the willing seller program. How do they contact you? Are they contacted? How do they know about it?
So we are actually already working with community information on a strategy for communicating it. In the past, it was communicated by council, press release. In some instances, if they're in a Florida Forever project boundary, staff had reached out to them in the past. So it's a multi-pronged approach, and I think especially that will be extremely important as we haven't acquired property in almost 10 years. And so letting the public know that the opportunity exists will be important, but we'll develop a communication strategy.
And then when they contact you, there's some kind of an application? Do they include their selling price?
No, sir.
That's negotiated by staff? How do we know, this is a concern I hear from the public. How do we protect taxpayers from somebody coming in with a price, and then as we go through the process, the price continues to climb? Would that make them ineligible if that happens, or is that for the committee to decide and then the county council to decide, or is there any way to safeguard against that, is the question.
So I can explain to you, as I understand what had happened previously, is that, for properties over a certain threshold, we get 2 appraisals. And so we kind of use those as our negotiating boundaries. There were an instance or 2 in the past where the council approved paying a small percentage over an appraised value, but that is not standard practice. For our program. Other programs around the state I had found in our files where we had went out and asked other counties what their practice was. Some will do it all the time, some will stay within, some had a threshold. And so if we go above the appraised value, it will come to you for approval.
I have a question about the cycle. This says cycle 1, so what is cycle 2?
So cycle 2 will, as we start actively negotiating and bringing properties back to the council for approval, we will open cycle 2, which is another call for nominations. So we may have people that, so the cycle closes to allow us to give time to evaluate the properties, and then we will open another call for nomination. So if there's 2 a year, in my mind, it looks like about 6 months apart, those call for nominations will come out. So if we receive a property within, so if the cycle's closed and we receive a property, it will be considered in the next open cycle.
But that date will be defined, this is October 1st, the next cycle is not defined for April or May.
It is not yet. Yes, ma'am.
There's no feedback from the committee? I know some of these people. They all have opinions and wisdom and knowledge.
Absolutely.
This is being recorded, right? Yeah, please speak into the mic.
I'm going to ask the council, as I say, because we struggle so much with forest and farmlands, are you comfortable with where we landed? This was probably one of our, I think, our few split votes. But it was over an issue that was not substantive, it was more timing than anything else. But it would be good if you could share with us, if you have some thoughts along these lines, in terms of what outcomes. Are we trying to consolidate areas? Are we trying to protect areas from development? I mean, it just seems to go in a lot of different directions. And I'm not saying any of them are bad. It was just that we were hoping that the council might, give us some of your thoughts in terms of how to approach this and how we should look at things as they come in, because it's a new opportunity.
But it was certainly a great concern of mine as I did a farm tour out in Northwest area, and you see that area has changed so much from the way the ag that we knew to what we know now, and what the current owners, what those needs are. And there was conversation about the agricultural easements and being able to work with the owners to be able to maintain that land, but also meet the needs of the community. So I think you've come, hit the balance, and if the farmers and owners are satisfied, and I'm looking at one of the farmers, a couple of the farmers that I met there, and it looks like they're pleased with the response, and if not, I'd like to hear from you.
I'll take a shot at this first, Steve, you can come back later. We look around, we can read and have a vision in our mind of what we think farmland should be, and then we can look around the county and see what is. The best farmland is gone already. It's got houses and stuff on top of it. Some of the farmlands that are left are in the fringes, in the area that development hasn't caught to them. It's the group of lands that are between the swamps, wildlife corridors and stuff that we're looking, and houses. And that's where I really see, I've had a hard time getting my hands around it, is the valuation and the appraisal process. And one, is it farmland or could it be farmland? Is it something that we want to keep as a green space now? Because right now, our current food system in this country is more defined on largeness. And we can have the small that we want, and that's great, and there's people that make money off of it, but we are nowhere near can feed our people yet, and so, we're small with the way our system is today. So, but what's that going to be like in the future? And so once we cover that up, all of our farmlands are good lands that could grow, are covered up with houses, there'll be nothing left. So I see this as a way to put land, maybe there's some areas that it's going to be green space for right now or whatever. It's probably not going to bring as much to the landowner as, land that's in a conservation easement. And I think here's where you're going to run into a problem, because a lot of these lands also have other uses for development. And so your appraisal process, I think, is going to give you problems, is how do you find what is this land worth? And what value are we putting on it as farmland, or are we going to use a development land, or what? Because we went through on our farm a failed conservation easement, and so I see from how the process worked, I don't see us doing it again. On our farm, maybe somebody else will, and I don't even know if I would use this process, because I don't know. Again, with the USDA and some of that, I don't know how it's going to work if you have development pressures coming your way.
So I just jotted some notes. I think that the agricultural easements can help steer development away from sensitive areas, perhaps stop development from moving in a direction. It certainly doesn't require any maintenance from the county as far as cost to maintain it, because the farmer is going to maintain it at the county's agreed upon level of maintenance. So that's a benefit. The other benefit is that it protects rural vistas, the pretty sight lines people like to see, cows in the pasture, crops in the field. There is an opportunity for beginning farmers and ranchers. There's a big push in USDA now to promote
young farmers and ranchers, this is people under the age of 35, get them in agriculture. To get veterans in agriculture is a big push, and minority farmers into agriculture. One of the roadblocks is the cost of land to acquire property to farm. But if it has a ag easement already on it, it's going to be a cheaper price because you're just not going to be able to develop. So there could be some benefits, not just for this generation that we're looking at, but for that generation 100 years from now, you would still see agriculture in Volusia County. It may not be the same, we probably will not be growing the same crops right now, but it would be something. I find that really fantastic.
I'd like to answer your question, your concern, but I also have a question that I need to understand in management. One of the problems that we see, not just in Volusia, but across the country, is that farmers don't live forever. And in America, the farming community of active farmers is getting older, and a lot of them don't have a succession. There's no children that want to take over farming. They've gone to the cities and they've gotten a job with whoever. But it's still a valuable land. It's still beautiful land, as Steve just said, that I think would benefit us to keep green. But if there's no management plan, is it still, can they still apply for this? Is it still a possibility, or do they have to have, does a farmer have to live there and say, well, I'm going to continue to manage my land? What happens when the farmer dies?
Good question. I think that's why it reads just as it does. That it doesn't say what the plan needs to be, but that there has been some consideration by the owner as to a plan. And I think in this arena, because it is brand new, some of it is going to have to be very situationally specific. And we're just going to have to look at that property, where it is in this period of time and what it produces, and try to reach the best recommendation we can.
And I understand that. I would just encourage the entire committee to consider the value of the farmland, even if it's not producing a cow or a corn or a vegetable. Because of the reasons that Steve said, they're beautiful vistas, but I think just as important as that is the fact that we're seeing increased flooding all over Volusia County, around the state, around the country. And a lot of that seems to be coming from the reduced amount of open land that accepts water and sucks it up, and as we add impermeable surfaces, we find more and more flooding. So I think it does add to the value of the quality of life in Volusia County if we preserve that land, even if it's not producing a crop. So that doesn't make your task any easier, but...
I do think in our discussion of water resources, this reference had a lot more to do with protections and potable water. But stormwater management is a tremendous issue for water resources. And so that is part of our thinking, and it's certainly part of evaluation. It came up more in the wetlands context, but it's absolutely part of a water resource value that would go with the property, and I can definitely anticipate what you're deciding.
And if
I'm glad that you added it.
And I just wanted to note, just as background of what we discussed through the process, a big factor of the forest and farmland is that it's going to have to change. We're going to have to make tweaks along the way. We've picked that a property has to meet 7 out of 12 of the criteria listed, so if there's not a management plan and it still hits 7 other criteria, that would be great. There's a lot of active discussion on, do we make sure that it has to include one of the preservation of farmland criteria, or is that too restrictive? Do we want to make sure that it's actively in use for ag or just zoned? So that's something that we went back and forth with for a while. If you've got some free time, you can watch the video. But I think where we settled is we want to see how it plays out. We want to give it an opportunity to go through a cycle or two and see if 7 is the right number, if we need to bump it down to 5 or 6 or up, and see who comes to us, what properties we get, and kind of go from there when we tweak them.
If I could, sir, the one thing that was surprising to me as I spoke to people about this is the importance of the rural vistas to the people of the county. Living in Osteen, I'm used to rural vistas, but, and my husband accuses me of never seeing a cow pasture I didn't like, but the number of people, even from cities, that commented to me about their desire to continue to be able to see rural vistas in our county was very surprising to me. And I think the water resource ties in very well here with the rural vistas, because to keep it open is going to help with the rural vistas, and it's going to help with the water resource. So that's one thing that I'm looking forward to working on as we move forward with this one.
I have a question for staff that I don't recall us talking about, and I noticed this today, so I have a question. Pertaining to number 6, underwater resources contain a significant area of medium or high groundwater recharge as determined by St. John's Water Management District Upper Floridian Aquifer Groundwater Recharge Map. Does that map change periodically, or is that set and been set? And I ask that because of our changing landscape constantly, it made me think of that.
So I'll look to our environmental management director. So it does change periodically. So they do provide updates, but not very often. That's what she just conveyed.
What's not often, I mean, ballpark, the most recent maps from 2015. So, not that often.
So may I repeat for the individuals online that the most recent map is from 2015.
I will add just, in my experience, that map from the Water Management District sort of errs on being too large versus too small, and to try to protect that recharge area. So that gives me some confidence that that'll be a good tool for us to start with, and if it proves that someone else can show a property that has excellent recharge, we may need to revisit this language, and it will be part of our efforts to amend along the way.
I just realized that things are being developed here is going in different directions, and I saw that today, and I thought that I'd be putting it in front of you.
If I may add to council real quick, one of the things I heard from when I had discussions with neighbors and people that own restaurants and stuff is that they love the conservation program, but they haven't seen the land. We tend to buy areas where people don't see it. It's very valuable for resource protection and wildlife protection, but it's not something they bump into or travel to or drive by often. So I would encourage you to consider not just the conservation corridor, but let's think a little bit wider. Think to the population areas where next to people can we buy something and protect it for them to see and appreciate. That's just a token of what we're doing.
I think that's an important point from what the chair said in the development and things being built and really being confined in one area and affecting our water flow. So I would be very happy to make that a strong point as well. I know in the LPGA corridor we have, we're talking about agriculture and farmlands. We actually have quite a bit of agriculture in District 4, which is, you wouldn't think that, northeast section of the county, but it's also slowly going away. And the people that are building are very aware of the value of land, right? So the land is farmed as it's sitting there until it's developed, and so you do have hay consistently, you do have corn consistently, you do have things like that being done until the development is done. But I would like to see that specific point to be stressed in the Volusia Forever lands, for sure.
Not to prolong this, but I'm just wondering, did y'all wrestle with the fact of, with all the other criteria, there's a big factor is public access. Is there public access required to farmland?
Well, conservation easement would be different than an acquisition. And so I think that just creates a different public purpose. I will say, I mentioned a workshop with the ECHO Committee, and I think your staff has really picked up on the, I hate buzzwords, but synergy between the two programs, that ECHO is an opportunity to bring some public uses to property that perhaps we haven't seen in the past. And I think that's a part of what brings also public support for both programs, is when they feel that it's not only acquired, it's of public use. So in that context, I think there was a lot of discussion about how do we bring public use and enjoyment to these properties.
The wildlife corridor was an additional thing as well that is very important to me. I know west of 95 we have a good corridor there along the river, but you know, I'm looking at the map, and we have wildlife that lives elsewhere in the county except for that one section. So as we are adding in lands, I'm hoping that it's more attached, more parallel, so that we can actually do something for the wildlife that lives in Volusia County as well.
I wanted to give one more point. We've talked about these easements. We've talked about conservation easements, we've talked about farmland easements, and we've talked like as if they're two different entities, and that's not necessarily A or B. But I think, you know, anytime you do an easement is basically a negotiated contract on what you're going to be able to do with the property after the fact that the easement's been signed. And so you may have, you know, a conservation easement that's going to allow cattle and timber and something on it that provides a rural vista, that's still kind of an agricultural pursuit. You may allow other things to go on that. You may even negotiate public access if someone wants it or not. It all depends on the property and who the landowner is. So my point is, just don't get hung up on A or B. It's a broad line, and hopefully the language and the rules will allow us to be creative and protect those properties that need to be protected. So we've got a great mapping system here in the county. We know a lot of the areas already that are important points for stormwater drainage, whether it's into the Atlantic Lagoon or to our spring basins or any of that stuff. So we need to utilize that stuff and get those easements, I believe, on those properties if we can't buy them.
Anybody else? I'll add one quick thing, is that this is a wildly popular program in Volusia County. It won by 70 what?
76.
That's unheard of. And it was buried. It was said it wasn't going to pass. It did. The public wants this, so you have it's a labor of love, but you're never going to keep everybody happy. But I know this council as a whole, I'll venture out to speak for them, that we appreciate that you have accepted the challenge and that you're working together, and we look forward to what you're going to bring to the council. So thank you.
I'm just super excited that it's coming to fruition and that we are preserving land in Volusia County. Super excited. Go ahead, Mary.
So I'll just say one thing to build on that I think that we should be really proud of is that we are the second largest in terms of acreage in the state that's locally conserved. So we're at about 55,000 acres. Hillsborough is about 62. I'm really competitive, so over the next 20 years.
But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be doing more.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I'll turn over our chair for.
No, we thank you for your support in this. It's, I worked the polls during the last election in support of this program, and I was amazed at just, even people who are relatively new immediately just grabbed onto this issue and brought to it, even without the history, they brought support and interest in terms of preserving this beautiful place that we live in. So I hope we will find all the success we can in the future. Thank you.
The point there is, once it's gone, it's gone. Yeah.
So just next steps, as the timeline indicated, we're going to be bringing to council probably August, September timeframe these criteria in a resolution format, so they're adopted by council, and we can open our nomination criteria October 1st, and then we'll be returning eventually to council with recommendations from the committee after they've gone through the process of those rankings. And certainly feedback in the interim from the committee, from the council, from the community will help guide us as we reopen our first land acquisition process here in the fall.
So a little break before the next meeting?
Well, because the next thing doesn't start till 3:40.
This section, Volusia will adjourn the meeting, and we'll have a brief break, and then we'll re-adjourn for echo. And now we're welcome to stay.
Jeff? That are probably wanting to come for that might not be here. And they're not expecting to be here till 3:45. I know that's an hour and 15 minutes from now.
So we're stuck with 3:45.
But we should come back.
So take a break, get something to eat.
So is what of the purpose of the program?
Okay, 1 minute warning if everybody wants to get their seat. Okay, we will call the Tuesday, July 13th, 2021 ECHO Advisory Committee Workshop meeting to order, actually on time this time. And Carissa, if you would call the roll, please.
Mr. Alt? Miss Morrissey? Here. Mr. Patterson? Here. Mr. Romeo? Mr. Santilli? Here. Miss Simmons? Miss Santilli. Mr. Surratt? Miss Northey?
Romeo's here.
For the record, Mr. Romeo is now here.
Romeo, where art thou?
Mr. Pendergast?
Still had 1 minute.
Oh, I bet.
Miss Gertman? Here. Mr. Johnson? Dr. Lowry?
Here.
Miss Post?
Here.
Mr. Robbins?
Here.
Miss Wheeler?
Here.
Mr. Brower?
Here. Thank you, Carissa, and I'll start off like I did last time, just thanking all of you for your service, for being here. As you know, you saw the vote. This was a wildly popular program, and so you have a lot of responsibility on your desk to spend taxpayer monies wisely. We all have faith in you that you can do that, and I will quick look around the room. I'm just going to add what I said the first time, that there's a notable absence in Miss Northey. Her husband had an unscheduled visit to the hospital. She's with him, and it's their personal business, so I'm not going to say more than that. I don't know more than that, but anytime I hear going to the hospital unscheduled, I don't like it. So please keep them in your thoughts and prayers. And with that, George, you want to take it away?
Sure. This will be the same format as what we just had. I would like to say we do have a lot of eager people out there looking to get projects off the ground. So we do have a timeline. So it'll be important that we can get changes into our guidebook as soon as possible so that we can get going with the project cycles. And again, I've received calls from numerous cities, and some have literally projects that they want to break ground very quickly on. So it's important that we can get some answers and get stuff into our guidebook as soon as possible. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Brad, and he can take us through the presentation and welcome the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and County Manager. I'd like to turn it over to Jay Pendergast, our Chair, for some opening remarks, if I may.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to say that we spent a lot of time reviewing the application, the workbook, and the guidelines, and it's actually gone through 2 years of review. The former ECHO board reviewed and made recommendations, and then this year we brought them back and reviewed them again with the new board members after the program's been reviewed. So everything that we're bringing here today has been very well vetted and discussed and clear, and I think it's a pretty clean proposal that we're bringing forward to you. So I look forward to hearing the comments on today's workshop.
Thanks, Jay. So today, same kind of process. We'll give you a snapshot of where we are in implementing the reauthorized program, the progress we've made under the previously authorized program, update you on audit recommended changes that everyone's seen a time or two before, and then present the process and award changes that the committee's recommending for your approval. There is one item related to the exceptional grant match that was tabled, and we'd like to bring that back to get some policy direction and discussion, and then present the timeline for implementation. We were responsive to our partners. As the county manager discussed, we have partners with projects in the hopper, and so we feel at this point we'll have them be able to submit them by the end of the fiscal year so that they may be able to encumber some of those funds. So that was taken into consideration and try to be responsive as well to our partners. So our first slide is just an update on the process. I want to publicly thank again the committee for all of their hard work since their appointments in March. And we've had 3 meetings, 2 workshops, including this one, and 5 listening sessions. So they've traveled the traveling roadshow that we've went around the county and listened to our partners and our citizens and their feedback about the program, which is reflected in what we're presenting to you today. Our timeline, of course, is today to have the workshop, and then at the August council meeting, bring back to you the final guidebook and recommended changes, which will allow us to keep on that timeline of the technical review in October, awards in early 2022. So just a snapshot of what we've been able to accomplish in terms of funded projects over the years. 227 total projects we've been able to fund and support our partners. Again, this is a matching program, so it's a one-to-one match. So our partners are as well putting some skin in the game, for lack of a better term. And so we've had 4 environmental projects, and with that, I will say a lot of these, there's some overlap. So there may be in some places, depending on who looks at it, we could say there's been 12, but there's some overlap in terms of environmental and outdoor. So if we have to put them in a nice, neat little category, this is how they would fall out in terms of the 4 environmental, 50 cultural projects, 43 historical, and 130 outdoor recreation projects. And again, I would say with this slide in mind that we don't determine the priorities of the organization submitting the grants. They submit based on their priorities. So the first thing we'd like to discuss is the audit recommended changes. So there were 11 recommendations from the audit that the committee concurred with and are recommending for approval. This audit was presented to the council in May and approved by the council, and so these have been incorporated into the new guidebook, and we're going to forego each of them. We'll talk about the committee recommended changes, but there is one high-level one that we wanted to discuss with you, and that is an opportunity to engage more of our nonprofits. We've heard a lot from our nonprofits in terms of being able to access this funding and participate in the program. At this point in time, the nonprofits require a 50% cash match, and the committee feels like that should stay the same for larger nonprofits that have over $500,000 in revenues and expenses. However, for our small nonprofits in the community, from $250,000 to $499,000, they're recommending a reduction in the cash match to 30%. So this is unencumbered funds for the project. There's other ways that our nonprofits can make up the rest of that 70%, because again, it's a one-for-one match. Some of that is property value. Some of that is in-kind services from volunteers or other professionals that are lending support to the project. So that's our small tier, our very small tier nonprofits with $250,000 or less in revenues and expenses, recommending a 20% cash match. So it will be a tiered cash match system based on the size of the nonprofits in order to facilitate some of that further engagement of nonprofits in the program. Some high-level recommendations from the committee as Parks and Rec team came and presented the amenities that have been provided to our citizens and the future needs. And so the committee is recommending increasing the annual trail set-aside from $1 million to $1.5 million to improve and expand our trail system. The program staffing and operations, just currently the program is supported by staff who are paid using the general fund. And again, we're trying to move this to a self-supporting, self-funded type of program. And the committee has made that recommendation to help us do that by funding the staff and operations out of the ad valorem assessment is the recommendation to council. So some committee recommended changes in terms of process and procedure. I think the third recommendation you have on your screen, as you know, the cost of labor and materials have increased dramatically. So in order to continue to provide our citizens with high-quality projects with adequate funding in today's construction market, the committee is recommending an increase in the standard grant award from $400,000 maximum to $600,000 maximum. With that kind of working hand in hand, coupled together, recommendation number 4 is to then also make an adjustment to the exceptional award grant amount from $1.8 million to $2 million within the 3-year period. Open grant projects. This committee is recommending that an applicant may only have 3 open projects at one time. This is to ensure that previously or concurrently awarded projects from the same entity are being completed in a timely manner. So kind of to facilitate, give them a little nudge that before you can apply for another one, that we need to make sure that the projects are getting completed on time. When we talk about recommendation number 6 is undisturbed use. So currently, the type of grant awarded determines the type of restrictive covenant or undisturbed use. So at this time, an expansion and restoration is a 30-year time frame, and a new facility or construction is 40 years. So what this does is creates a standard 25-year time frame of undisturbed use across project areas. The previous committee did recommend 20 years, and this committee felt that 25 was a good compromise between the 20 and 40. I will be frank with you about some of our partners and our projects that are on leased lands. Marine Science Center, Marine Discovery Center are operating on state leases, and that presents a problem sometimes because they're typically 20 or 25 years in length. Required construction documents, and again, this is to make sure that we're getting procurement-ready, shovel-ready projects in the door for the ECHO program. And so what we've changed, or what they're recommending to change, is that specific types of plans are included. For example, for outdoor projects, they're recommending that the individual who's applying has a bid set of plans which are ready to be used in the procurement process. If it is a new construction, remodel, or historic projects, the committee is recommending a bid set of architectural and engineering plans which are ready to be used in the bid process to facilitate some of that starting of the projects. 8, we were not clear in the past about the business feasibility and marketing plans, and we received some that weren't localized. So some of our applicants would use national feasibility or marketing plans where we're going to be more, the recommendation is to be more specific in our language, that this needs to be specific to the project and the language. So it's just tightening up the language to make sure that they've really done their research here locally and that there's a need for the project. Notice to proceed, again, this is previously, a performance bond was previously required, but was not explicated very clearly in our guidelines that about the timeline or the time frame that it's needed. So what this does is just, again, tightening up the language and clarifies the time frame and ensures we receive the performance bond before construction begins, not after. And then branding and marketing, again, this is clarifying the expectations for our partners and trying to be as clear as possible. This was an expectation in the past, but this requirement did not have a time frame. So we're just tightening up the language to ensure that 90 days post-award, we're being advertised as a partner as well. And then the exceptional grant, and this is the one item that was tabled, and the exceptional grant required match is currently 4-to-1. And of course, let me back up a little and say what an exceptional grant is, according to our ECHO guidelines. And that is a project that is of paramount and has crucial countywide importance. And so it has a larger dollar amount award, up to $2 million rather. So currently the match is 4-to-1. The committee entertained 1-to-1, but the item was tabled for further discussion. So that concludes my recommendations, and I will turn it over to the chairs.
And I'll open it up for questions.
I have a question. Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
Regarding the notice to proceed, I know that we've had lots of discussion from various entities that are, we've been talking about ECHO for a while, and so there are many people laying in wait, really anxious to jump on board. Some of those, you discussed the rising construction cost and a lot of things going on, and some have the ability to push through their projects and start them now or in September, or before the end of the year, before this actually, the application deadlines come to fruition. So is that an area, have we looked at actually allowing an application for someone that has already started a project instead of looking at a future project? Anyone?
Can I comment on that?
Sure.
We've done that in the past. Jeffrey Alt.
Thanks.
We've done that in the past. If you go back to early ECHO grants, one of the original grants was the Athens Theater. The Athens restoration actually started in the 90s. So, and the restoration, the historic restoration of the facade, the exterior of the building, was actually completed before ECHO even started. That was done with 5 county grants, 5 city grants, and then they used that to match a state historic grant. When ECHO started, all of those expenses and that state grant was actually used to, as match for that original ECHO grant. So we've done this in the past. Now, I saw somewhere along the lines, I believe, rules were changed, probably for very good reasons, but we did do that in the past. And
So I'm wondering, does anyone know what those reasons were, or since we have done it in the past before? And perhaps if we looked at something like that, if we looked at that they were so far into the project, so not, 2 weeks from completion, and then now they're wanting money, but generally needing money. So, 1 month into the process would be the deadline. I know that there's one project in one of my cities in Holly Hill, phenomenal project internationally, bringing in international groups. So, that they're looking to start in September, but they wouldn't finish till September of 2022. So, but not being able to get in before the deadline. So just, any comments, any opinions?
Well, the one comment is, once you start taking things out of sequence, then you kind of undo the whole program. I mean, if you could just apply at any time and you're ready to go, then why would you start with the mandatory workshop and the tour for the board members and everything? So there's always been a very rigid schedule so that things get vetted correctly. And so that's kind of one of the reasons not to just take things in at any given time. There's always been a exception for historical projects. We have had people come to us multiple times over the years with an emergency. A historic building, a roof leak occurred, and next thing you know, you had a major mess. So there have been some historic projects that have been taken out of sequence. But traditionally, all of the other projects have been going through the calendar that's established. And the reason for the calendar is because of the staff looks into the application, looks at the appropriateness of the application, is everything filled out correctly, things like that. So I think if there are too many projects just coming in, you could have one every month.
Right.
Next thing you know, it's causing havoc with being able to really review them correctly.
So I'm not asking to go outside of the deadline, the application deadline, or the timeframes that you have listed. It's more the notice to proceed, right? Because if they're already proceeding, they're proceeding without the notice to proceed. So that's really, I think, the sticking point. And even if they were to wait, because you could still be vetted, right? If they put in by the final application deadline of 10/21, but they would have it's just a notice to proceed.
I mean, I guess you can proceed at any given time, but you don't have a guarantee that
Exactly.
you're going to receive a grant.
Exactly, yeah, and I think that would be that would be
So,
obviously understood.
So
But but is there a specific, can they proceed without a notice to proceed and still get, because that doesn't seem like that's feasible, right?
Yeah, you're speaking with a pictorial.
Yes, absolutely.
I understand, and we had a conversation about that.
Right.
But then, in our last meeting, we did not address it, but they addressed it with you. I think, did you talk to them, Brad, about the situation, because it was basically tabled, and we didn't look at it any further as an exception.
Right.
So maybe you can give us some light on that.
So, the committee has the ability to consider anything on a case-by-case basis and make a recommendation to council. And so what we've done is, we've invited Holly Hill to come to our meeting next week and request an exception in terms of being able to apply after the project has started, essentially. I think Mr. Forte has some valid reasons as to why it should be considered. And so, we've invited him to come to the next meeting, and the committee will make that consideration for this specific project. And I think it's to protect against, really, like what you said, we finished our project, we found this pot of money.
Right.
That's not the case.
Right.
And so I think that it will be the committee's recommendation based on our meeting next week.
So I guess that's my question, because we are here to actually come up with the actual guidelines, so wasn't really looking for an exception per se, because we haven't really set up what it would be an exception to, right? So didn't know if that could be something set into the guidelines, or that would be something that you would think about putting into the guidelines. If a project, God forbid, construction prices keep going up or whatever, if someone were able to get a month in, but still be putting it by the application deadline, it's that notice to proceed. I think I'm just asking, because if we continuously ask for special exceptions, then we sort of get back to where we were at square one again, so, but this is the time to be discussing that, right, so that they're not exceptions.
Well, but we have guidelines now. It's not like we're starting fresh, right? The guidelines are in place. We're making adjustments to the guidelines as we go forward. But I tell you, there's a lot of reasons they could be an exception, and as a project, one of which is we've given them money before, we've granted money there, they performed beautifully, and we like the project. So, I think we need to treat it as an exception in that it doesn't fit the process that we have in place, but I think there's an excellent opportunity for them to accept the grant, even though they started early.
Okay, all right, I just wanted to make sure we're discussing the exception or the actual guidelines. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Mr. Chair? Yes. Just one other point on that, and these are all great points, and we don't want to go down a lot of exceptions, but one thing in this particular case, because we are reauthorizing the program, and as was mentioned, we pushed off the guidebook to have both committees, the original committee made guideline recommendations, and now the new sitting committee reviewed and added that on, so we're out of cycle, and that's one of the problems. I think some of our applicants would have been easily able to have their stuff in at the right time frame. They're waiting on us. So, and then because of other factors that are surrounding their projects, they had to get moving. So that's why, I think there are grounds here to have it, even though I agree with it, we don't want to get in the habit of making a lot of exceptions,
Right.
but this is a case where we're actually part of the reason.
Okay.
So,
Thank you for clarifying.
But I think even that has to be defined, because I think when you get into next year and you've made those exceptions, then when somebody, I guess, has a similar scenario and they're not approved, then how are they going to respond? So I think we have to be cautious how we proceed with that. On the subject of nonprofits, I'm really happy to see the thoughtfulness that's gone into this regarding especially the small nonprofits that are just based on volunteers, right? Are serving our local small communities, and to see that property values the volunteer, and there's other ways of helping them meet that match, and I was very much looking forward to that. So I'm grateful to see the thoughtfulness, and I actually support that for sure. So.
I have a question about compliance. For most of your projects, it requires an ongoing program, plans to be carried out. How do you deal with that in compliance? And do you run into any problems where somebody qualifies, they get through everything, but then they don't follow through on the upkeep of the project, on continuing programs? Is there a compliance component built around that? Uh-oh, the big guns.
Carmen Hall, Community Assistance Director. So as far as compliance goes, after a project has completed the construction phase, we do have a monitoring program. And so staff goes and completes on-site visits at least once every 3 years. And when we go out, we're checking to make sure that they completed the project would be completed at that time, but there's still public accessibility, and that they are offering the same category of service that they indicated in their original application. Also that the restrictive covenant is still recorded on the property, and that there's no other liens against the property that would make that property over encumbered in case it was no longer in compliance. At that point, if everything is okay, then we won't go back out for another 3 years. However, if there's an issue, we'll send them a letter saying that they need to correct whatever the issue is. A common thing is maybe a sign has eroded and you can't actually see the echo sign anymore. So maybe they need to fix the sign, paint it, whatever the case is. And they'll correct those issues, and then we'll go back a following year, and we have to have 2 clean monitoring reports before we step back and don't visit the site for another 3 years. Now, if we get a public complaint, we will go out on site and just see if there's an issue or if there's anything we need to look into.
Thank you. I guess I'm really wondering about, and this is not a criticism, but we're opening up to smaller nonprofits, which is a good thing. I'm glad to see that step. Do you anticipate any issues with that? If somebody gives you a plan, a small nonprofit, this is the program, this is what we're going to do, can you tell if they're going to be able to do that 2 years, 3 years down the road before you give them the money?
You are required to submit a business plan and show how you're going to operate that facility moving forward. And so they have to have a cost analysis of how much it's going to cost for staffing, what they anticipate it will be moving forward, and that is submitted in their application process. So that's something that the committee would evaluate when they're reviewing the proposal.
Am I creating a problem where there's never been one, or have you ever seen a compliance issue with,
Yes.
we're not carrying?
Yes, we have.
Okay.
There's been a couple. With them, we're in contact with those projects. They're communicating with the committee and providing presentations sporadically on what their compliance issues are and what their plans are to become in compliance. But there has been a few issues with some of the nonprofits.
Okay.
Chair, I have another question.
Yes, ma'am. Barbara Gertman.
The increase from 400 to 600 for the standard grant, and then for the exceptional grant amount, the increase is the same 200,000. And it would seem to me, based on percentage, that for the exceptional grant, we may consider a larger amount. Is there a reason why we landed on 200,000 for both of those grant opportunities?
Well, I'm embarrassed to say, I think it was because it was a round number. But no, we did not consider it as a percentage, but I think that's a very good suggestion.
Okay, I just wonder, I'm certainly interested in some exceptional grant projects, perhaps for my district. So I certainly would encourage if we can consider maybe bumping it up a little bit.
Well, I think you also have to look at the match, because the reason this was tabled is the match was recommended that we reduce it to 1-to-1. Currently, it's 4-to-1. So unfortunately, what a lot of organizations are doing is they just apply 3 or 4 times at a 1-to-1 match, and it takes 4 years to get through the project, where if it was a 1-to-1 match, maybe they would just apply once and accomplish the entire project maybe a little bit more quickly.
Right, and I would support that as well, because if it is a project that's deserving of an exceptional award, then why aren't we doing what it takes to get it done? So I think that's part of the feedback, is the additional hoops that we're making organizations jump through when it's something that we're deeming to be beneficial. And to be an exceptional grant, it says it needs to be beneficial to Volusia-wide, right? So I would just like for us to reconsider what that means and how we can give that support.
Yes, Jeff.
The level of the exceptional grant has also changed throughout the years. It originally started at $2.4 million, and the first exceptional grant was the News Journal Center. Then there were 2 exceptional grants at $3 million, and I'm not sure when it was reduced back to 1.8, or for what reasons, but that price that figure has fluctuated over the years too.
And for that very reason, considering where we are, 10, 12 years later, it would seem that we would be at 3 million now and 1.8 then. So considering what it takes to get a large project done, so I certainly would ask you to consider that as an option.
One other question, maybe. One of the things that I think that we're really doing well is a trail program in Volusia County. I'm really happy to see you go from $1 million to $1.5 million. The observation is frequently made to some of us, depending on what district they're in, that there seems to be heavy trails in the west and no trails in the east. And I'm wondering if what this committee thinks about coming up with a master trail plan. So other counties, I think Lake County has implemented one. It would take you off the hook, us off the, and it's just good planning. Did that come up in your meetings and your discussions? I see a lot of heads tonight. That's good.
Well, it kind of did, but I'll get on my soapbox again, because not only the trail system, but it goes beyond that. I think there needs to be master planning for ECHO in total, to where we're looking at all the projects countywide, not just regionally, but also how it distributes among the various projects, whether it be ecological or cultural or historic. And so I think there needs to be a master plan. I think it's going to end up in the county staff position to try to put that together. I think it's going to be more like what they do in Forever, and I think it will take a little more active participation to really look at these projects and say, okay, how do we develop them further? Because the trails are a great example, and whether it brings it to the East Coast or not, I think we need a lot more master planning involved. One other thing about it, and it's not just the master plan, but it goes against the small nonprofits, is that if you notice the first graph they put up there, and all the projects are in the O, and they're not in the others. In fact, what it comes down to, and I did the math, all the others combined, okay, the O takes care of all the others combined plus 34%. That's completely unbalanced, and it shouldn't be there. And based on the ECHO program, we ought to do more with it. Some of it goes with the nonprofits, because that O is being generated by municipalities who are putting parks in. Beautiful projects, terrific, they should be done. But I think we need to work harder at getting better balance, not only countywide, but also in projects themselves. And I think a master plan will help facilitate that.
Well, if I can make a comment also, I'm sorry.
I'm just saying, so there you go, Brad, that's on you.
No, but
I just wanted to make that right.
What I was going to say is,
An expectation.
we're really creating a new character here, because trails on the east side of the county are really going to be urban trails. We're really talking about connectivity within developed areas. And I have my soapbox like Jack. I mean, I live in New Smyrna, and you cannot get from Smyrna Dunes Park to the Canaveral seashore safely. And it's county, it's city, but in between those two parks, there's like maybe 6 parks. Some of them are county parks for the beach, the beach parking lots at Hiles and et cetera, et cetera. But we're creating a whole new system. The trails right now, we always kind of think of them being like out in the woods. And I do believe that urban trails are the next step in our trail process.
I support that, but also West Volusia ecotourism is a big part of. Don't laugh at me, Chief.
I'm agreeing with
You know how I feel about the west side. So, and there's so much development and so much investment that has happened on the west side. So, I think it's going to be great when we can make that interconnection with trails to the east side. But until that time, let's continue to make the west side trails be something that can help connect us and make us a tourism interest for those going to Disney. And we need a couple of those days over here on the west and the east side. Come visit the beach and come visit our trail and enjoy our ecotourism. And we make that connection, so thanks.
And do I understand that this was just handed to you, Brad, for a master plan?
Oh, actually,
That's what I heard.
the committee voted at our last meeting to engage in some sort of master planning process, planning document, and so through that recommendation, when we come back next week, some of that work will be to flesh out what that looks like in terms of community involvement. Maybe do we workshop some things in order to see what the need is? How do we involve our partners in that process? So it's already in motion.
Good. Will that include Jack's suggestion of each letter of ECHO? Because it really is unbalanced to outdoors. And
I think that it will, Jack, instead of putting words in all the committee's mouth, I think that a lot of the committee echo Jack's sentiments is looking at the data and that how can we do better? And so that will be part of the process, is listening and trying to understand how can we do better going forward. And that planning document will give us the roadmap, the strategic roadmap to help us get there.
I'd also ask, how do we help small and medium nonprofits prepare?
Yeah.
Right? How do we guide them So when it's time, they're in a better position to understand what those needs are, what they need to do to start preparing, whether it's for the next submission or the following, or it takes them 2 to 3 years. So whatever that is, can that also be part of the process, that we outline a better system? Because just from the feedback, it's not very clear or hasn't been.
Yes, ma'am. And so, two thoughts on that is that we do have a mandatory workshop for applicants where we try to walk them through the process to make it very clear to them. We also have a staff member who's extremely dedicated to helping those nonprofits be successful. And the third point is that we have rewritten the guidebook to be more user-friendly. And so that will come before you. And the comment back from the auditor was, this is wonderful, because it's much more clear. We've shared a draft with him. So it's kind of a three-pronged approach to help our nonprofits be successful.
And if I could interject, also, when the applicants fill out the grant, they send it in, staff reviews that and comments, and they're given a period of time to correct any deficiencies within the grant before the final review. So we already have a pretty good system in place as far as educating people how to apply for the grant and helping them get through it in case they do make a mistake. They're not just thrown out instantly because it's, one line's missing.
Okay. Yeah, but I think it's also the feedback from those users, right? So we can think we have a good process, but if the people who are attempting to use it don't feel that that's usable, then I think we just need to find that balance between the two.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. But I think, the process is pretty good, and the barriers, I asked a lot of questions in a previous workshop about the nonprofits, and why in fact they weren't participating. And the answer I got, because I thought perhaps it was the burden of writing for a grant and putting that all together, and that was so hard. But that was not the answer I got. The answer I got is really capital. It's really matching the funds. And so the sliding scale, I think, takes care of a lot of that. I will take it another step, though, and I think this would be a good question for you to ask on how we're addressing this, is I think we ought to be going out and pursuing nonprofits in areas and telling them, we think you should do this. In other words, we should take a proactive pursuit of some of these projects versus being simply reacting to projects that are coming to us.
And that would be my point, saying we need to do better to address that. As you said, be more proactive, have a workshop with small nonprofits specifically. Before it's time for the mandatory meeting, let's get them started early, even thinking in that way, because I find if you've got nonprofits, they're not even focused in that way, right? The culture doesn't support that. It's a volunteer organization. What's the best way forward to get this need met? And I think we can just do a better job, recognizing that culture and that mindset and trying to be that proactive resource for them. Mr. Resource Stewardship.
And if I could, I would just say that, we are on a pretty expedited timeline to reopen the grant application. So I think part of the master planning sounds like it's going to be very engaged on that nonprofit piece, but having separate workshops maybe for the second cycle as opposed to the one that we're trying to push forward next month.
I don't think we have to rush it. I mean, they haven't been getting it, so if we take the time to help them get it right, I would be more than satisfied with that. Thank you.
Somebody mentioned more, I think it was you, Brad, community involvement, listening sessions. I'd like to to encourage all of you that took your time to go to the community meetings that weren't very well attended in person. I don't know if, Donna, if you know how much better it was online, or was it still pretty weak?
Donna Butler, Community Services Director, is about the same. We'd have approximately 15 in person and 15 online. It varied from meeting to meeting, and that was pretty much the same on Echo and Forever. That might be high on some meetings it was a little smaller, but on average, that was what it was.
Okay.
I do want to address, I know that we may not have been as proactive, but Carmen Hall, who's fading out here from her Echo responsibilities, has met with a lot of nonprofits to help them shape what they're trying to accomplish. In some cases, they don't know. They have a building they want to preserve, but they don't know that they have to have a plan for what they want to do in the building in order to get these Echo funds. We had a woman who came to one of our Echo listening sessions in Ormond. If you'll remember, she said, I wouldn't be here now supporting this if I hadn't met with Carmen, because she didn't have match dollars. Well, she was smart. She went to the city of Ormond Beach. Now they're partnering her nonprofit with the city, and they're going to make an Echo application, and she's excited and ready to go. So we do that. We can take it another step, absolutely, and we'll make sure we engage more. But if you have a nonprofit, send them our way. Brad can meet with them. I can meet with them. His staff can, and we will encourage them. We're not going to write their grant, but we sure can help them.
And you're also going to encourage them that this is a long-term project. It's not just one and done. You got to maintain it every year. That's a y'all are bringing us good fruit back here. I think you're improving Echo, so I can congratulate you for that. And I don't want to put you on the spot, Jay or anybody else. I've heard from Jack some future hopes, some goals that he has for Echo. Do any of the rest of you have anything you'd like to share that you think we need to know or keep in mind for your goals for Echo? Because you really are changing it in ways that are going to be better for the public, I think.
Well, we've always been a reactionary board. When you, excuse me, when you look at the breakdown of the type of projects that we've been reviewing and approving, we are reviewing what's coming to us. We haven't gone out looking for projects or suggesting projects, because our role has been as an advisory board, reviewing the applications and making sure that we can give sound advice to the council. But we have not, as a board, ever gone out and said, here's something that needs to be done. How can we make that happen? That really hasn't been in our, and I feel like in some ways if we do that, then we're no longer as impartial. Because right now, when I review an application, I'm completely impartial, as far as a sports facility in Ormond versus something in DeLand or anywhere. I'm pretty much impartial to it. But it is annoying that we're just reacting. And, maybe some of the, maybe the input needs to come from the county council, or it would be really nice if it came from the community. And that would be the ultimate goal. But for some reason, people just are not coming to us with these great ideas, because we know they're out there. So I can't say I have an answer to that one.
Yeah, I think the master plan, to some extent, takes the impartiality into it. In other words, a master plan says in general what we're talking about. So I'm certainly not, I have no agenda to feather my own bed or going in any kind of direction, as much as we're just trying to create more diversity in the projects and better spread in the county. But to me, one way that would work, and I've talked to folks with Volusia Forever, this is what they did. In other words, they went out and knocked on a door and said, this particular place is of interest to us, are you interested in selling it or creating an easement in order to do these different things to match up to their plan? And so perhaps, and so I know that's legwork, and that's people doing things, and it runs the risk of being, being partial to a particular thing. But I'm thinking what might be a good way to do it is to connect with Volusia Forever and perhaps split responsibilities with an individual who's already doing this sort of thing with them and doing it through ECHO so that we're planning the process as we go forward versus just waiting for the applications to arrive. But I know that's different than we've done, and I think it's more work, but I think we get a lot more out of it at the end. Just my opinion.
Sarah Lee, did you have, yeah.
Good afternoon. I'm a new member, so I don't have nearly the history as my colleagues here, but I do have a lot of experience and knowledge of the county as a whole, professionally, what I've done. But I have to say, I honestly, given that we did these workshops during the pandemic, I was surprised at the turnout. I thought it was a good turnout, and I also felt like we heard from, it was interesting to me how, it's always been interesting to me how the county is so different around the county as you travel. But I felt like we heard some really good insight and desires around the county from some organizations and individuals who felt like they have goals that they believe are consistent with ECHO, yet have not been able to be addressed in the program. And I feel like the deliberations that we as a committee have done have really tried to look at what we heard, and I know that many of us were nodding our heads when we were listening to the public about what they wanted to do, that we were feeling like, yeah, that would be great. That seems so consistent. Let's figure it out. So I just want to kind of throw that out there, that I feel like we're, I have to agree with Mr. Prendergast. I do feel we need to be able to remain objective in reviewing grants. There may, in fact, be years, and maybe there were, and I'm not aware, you don't have enough funding for every application. So it's extremely critical, that we recognize what our guidelines say and remain impartial. But I really felt like we were taking the charges that you've given to us seriously, and the benefit of new and past experience trying to improve on where we take this program for everybody here.
Chair, I was also disappointed.
Go ahead. Ms. Wheeler?
Good job. I was going to say, I thought when you said 15 people attended and 15 virtual, I thought that was a good response as well, because I felt like you would get a cross-section of response. I mean, at this time, nobody's filling the room, right? So, and the people who were there were people who cared about the issue. And you're not going to find that everywhere. So you're not going to fill a room with 50 people when you're just asking for, their opinion. If you had 5 events and 15 people 5 times, or 30 people 5 times, to me, that's pretty good compared to a lot of feedback or opportunities that people have to respond to us. So I just thought that was a good opportunity. Thanks.
Anybody else? Yes, sir.
David Romeo. I just want to reiterate, I agree that the attendance was really good, and certain projects like, Ms. Post was bringing up about projects we wanted to get going on. There's a few others that was also mentioned in that, in our meetings. I don't know if we're going to be contacting those people as well to come to our next section to
discuss those projects with us, but that would be something we might want to do. We had some people over in Deltona, et cetera, that was discussing some projects. And, being a first time on this board as well, I wanted to get things going. So I just must say that our group here has done an excellent job, I feel, deliberating what we went over today. Barbara, great point on the exceptional grants. We need to definitely look at that in our next meeting. But I think we've come a long ways, and we really want to get things rolling. And it's just going to bear with us for a little while. I think we'll be very proactive. The master plan we discussed with the trails, I think, is a great, and if we're committed to giving them funds, they can put that in that. And also the master plan we're looking for ECHO, I think is a great idea to look at it. And I think we have a lot more people coming to apply, especially with the exceptions for the non-for-profits, and we can look at other things too if we need to, but I think it's coming along very, very well. I would like to speed up a little bit more, but I understand where we're going. And get the applicants applying. That's exciting to see that. But that's all I wanted to say.
Good, thank you. Stacy?
Thank you, Stacy Simmons. I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to be involved in this board. I thought that the listening sessions were also very beneficial. An opportunity, like you said, to 15 people in a room, as you know from Extension, that's a pretty good crowd. You can't really pack a room these days. So the opportunities to hear from the public, I think, are crucial, and gives me a good perspective going forward. And then the enlightening screen of the funding project overview. Environmental, we can do better. So that's my mission. Thank you.
Food and alcohol. We'll usually pack a room. Anybody else? Jeffrey Alt?
The county also has a historic advisory panel that I would like to be able to make better use of in terms of dealing with the H and ECHO.
Cultural. And the cultural board. I have one last question.
Mr. Patterson was just going to tell.
Go ahead,
Do you mind holding for
Yeah,
a
go
second?
ahead.
I like to listen a lot. Coming from the county council side of this to this position I'm in now, it's interesting. And the trails, I think what we've done on the west side have been really interesting in many respects, considering that many times we were met with torches and tar and feathers over going through big neighborhoods and some of the things that we've had to do it, and especially on the west side in my old county council district, some of the people in Glenwood who weren't real happy about us coming through their neighborhoods, and was something that might be a real problem in looking at on the east side of the county, where you have, neighborhoods, and they're smaller, they're not big, land areas like we have over here on the west side. And then a lot of the projects. So this is really a new learning experience for me, but I'm coming up to the challenge of what we're going to be faced with, because we are responsible to the taxpayers, actually. And if we start getting a little too loosey-goosey on this, 20 years from now, would this program be continued? And that's where I look at this, is making sure that this program goes on forever. It was important to me, and I've always supported it, but at times, you on the county council are going to have to make some decisions that are going to probably make some people mad. But, I'm used to it. This has been an interesting day today.
Somebody, Regina?
I'm Reggie Santilli, and I would just like to concur with what Barb says.
I think it's very important that we do raise the amount of the exceptional grant. I'm in real estate and development, and $3 million is not much money. And these kind of projects will make a big difference to our county.
Heather Post.
So I'm looking at the funded projects overview, and in looking at everything divided out, I'm looking at 4 projects in the environmental, and I know Stacy is very much on the environmental side. Does staff have an idea of this off the top of their head by chance, the 4 projects, or just to get an idea of what those were?
So, yes, I asked this question before. And I've asked our admin coordinator, we have an ArcGIS story map of all of the projects. And I've asked her before the meeting to post that on the resource stewardship page so people can look, and they're organized by the letters. And that's why I say there is some overlap, because on the story map, there's 12 E projects. And so the 4 that we've listed here, though, is Ormond Beach Environmental Center, Marine Discovery Center, Lyonia, and the Marine Science Center. So you can see how there could be some overlap there.
Okay.
But the ArcGIS story map, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and there's some pictures of the projects in there. So I would encourage the public and the committee and the council to look through those.
I'd be interested, we're talking about basically doing advocacy in the public, right, and putting the message out that this exists and that you can be involved, especially for the nonprofits. And if we are trying to get a little bit more well-rounded, if we could come up with, environmental projects, so those are the 4, those are all environmental learning centers, right? What other types of projects, environmental projects, would be ideal for an ECHO grant? So not being truly specific, but just very, very general verbiage, I think might give the public or these nonprofits or whoever else an idea of, we didn't even think of that before. And I'm not talking water infrastructure or sewer or anything, but just to stress that point, but okay.
Can I respond to you? Jeff Ward. At the listening session, several people did mention stuff like having water refill stations, at the parks. Well, currently that has to fit within another grant because we have parks all over the place. So that might be one area that we could address in terms of if the city or the county wanted to add water refill stations at all of the parks. It's just one grant instead of a grant for every single specific park and facility.
Okay. I know Holly Hill's been really working on that as well, yeah. Okay. Are there any other ideas that were addressed in the meetings? Can you just give me some other examples of the environmental?
From an environmental standpoint, the one we heard several times at more than one meeting was the plantings along shorelines that would help with cleaning,
Green infrastructure.
That we heard from several organizations as well as at more than one of the listening sessions. And
okay.
And part of the issue was that it didn't cleanly fit within our criteria. And so I think, we have to look at our criteria, and that will help open up the ecological part. Because you notice that the projects they talked about were actually ecological buildings and facilities dealing with that. And here we're talking about infrastructure like shorelines and whatnot, truly ecological projects and probably valuable for ECHO to be doing, but not perfectly within our criteria.
So precisely my point, I want to make sure that we are, this is the opportunity, right? So I want to make sure that we're looking forward and doing the things that the community needs and the community wants.
I certainly hope so.
Okay. So can they be worked into that
Yes.
criteria? That's what I'm saying.
I think so, but...
Yeah, I think that's important.
We're not there yet.
And I think this is part of a longer conversation that we'll have as part of the planning process, and to discuss green infrastructure and other options. But in order to get the program out the door and on the timeline, we need to move forward and try what we have. But as I said with Forever, the word for these programs is flexibility. We need to be flexible, but we also need to be not loosey-goosey, as Mr. Patterson said. So finding the balance between those two is, I think, what the planning process will help us do.
Could we come up with just some bullet point suggestions? So 4 bullet points for environmental, 4 bullet points for cultural, historical, just example ideas like that. So green space, the centers, I guess, would be one if we want to do another center, but whatever, just to start the thought process going in the public and to where they could look at, some possibilities, and it's actually laid out. If we could just bullet point some of that and perhaps put it on the website. Okay.
You're talking about as we go along, not right this second?
Well, through the process. I mean, we could throw out, I could put some bullet points on social media. I mean, we're looking at people putting in the applications by the end of October, right? So it's probably a really good idea that they start thinking about what's feasible now, and, it's already into July, so just some bullet points. Okay.
We can send them to Brad. I think we've already been asked by Jack for more input from the council, so...
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'd like to know too. That's why I'm asking. What are some other things that could be applicable, right? And I'd like to know, so... Yeah.
Somebody else was starting to talk? No?
I think just sort of to your question, that goes along with at the Forever workshop, you have different categories, and each one of those categories has different criteria. That's what I hope we're talking about when we discuss ECHO with ECH and O. Each one of those letters has slightly different criteria. And I believe that as we develop this over the next, right now we have this grant cycle we want to get out. But next year, as we come up with a master plan, we need to look at ECH and O individually, make sure we understand that the criteria for each one might be different, match requirements might be different, and our actual scoring sheet might be different for each category.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
That's interesting. Anybody else? Well, I have one thing for staff that I remember talking about in agenda meetings. I just wanted to see if I'm remembering correctly. Are we staff working on a way to get information on the website, a simple template where the public can look and see what projects are either being considered or in process, and the amount of money spent, so that so people know how their money is being spent, and there are things happening. I think you have a tremendous amount of support, not just based on the vote, but I think people are trusting you to do this well, and they deserve the information of seeing progress and knowing what's going on.
We are having those conversations, and one of the things that we discussed that I had previous experience with a bonded transportation project when I was at Clay is a dashboard that shows projects, what percentage they're completed, how much has been reimbursed, what the total budget is. So that's one area that we've been exploring and hope to, as we move throughout the planning process in the next year, have up on our website for transparency's sake, but also to give people updates on where we are. You know, the citizens
Yes.
deserve to know.
Yeah, and that will keep the project alive forever, as Mr. Patterson said. My last thing is just a suggestion. Jeffrey, you had suggested working with the Historical Preservation Board. I think it comes to my mind when we're talking about trails on the east side, that we could also easily work with the byway committee, who knows the paths that are byways on the east side, and that would be a great place to start, I think. So more interaction amongst committees might be helpful. But thank you all again. Council, anything else? George, staff? Yes. Thank you all very much for staying late and for the work that you're doing at Great Bay. And we will call the meeting adjourned.
Could we just